Did you know Hasport wants to give you a free set of EG K-Series swap mounts?
Really? For free?
Yeah, for free. Welcome to VTEC Academy. You're about to get a hookup.
Yeah. For free?
That's okay. Hasport makes 4 different mount kits, actually 5 different mount kits for the EG, if you include the lean. But they make 4 different common mount kits. And we're going to be trying all those in the Budget EG today. And once we're done with that, Hasport would like to give you one of these sets of mounts for your car. So follow along today and we'll tell you how you can win those mounts from Hasport. The first kit we have here today, this is called the EGK2 kit. It's probably the kit that's been in production longest with Hasport.
Yep.
So basically this is used for putting an a K-Series in an EG Civic, and it also works on DC2 by the way, but it works in the EG Civic and it works with the RSX transmission, with the EP3 transmission, and also with the 2006 to 2011 Civic Si transmission. So what we have here is we're going to go ahead and use that mount kit in the EG and show you just how it works. One of the things I want to talk about before we even get started is Hasport mount kits are dual height. And the reason they're dual height is because the block height is different. So in order to keep the header fitting the same, whether you're using a K24 or K20, Hasport makes a mount so that you can mount the engine at 2 different heights, and basically that's going to just drop the block down about 3/4 of an inch, but the head stays in the same place. So the header coming out fits underneath the same on either one of those cars. Also, if you buy a turbo kit, let's say one from Full Race, it's going to fit the same whether you have a K20 or a K24. So you don't have to make any modifications. None of the stuff's under stress. So let's go ahead and put it in. This is our K20Z3, it comes out of the 06 Civic Si. The reason this works like the RSX is this right here. You have these 2 bolt holes that are here on the differential. RSX transmission shares that as well, as does the EP3 transmission. This is actually an RSX transmission. It's actually gutted. We use it for trying in cars. And this is going to be our first one. Chassis prep for the EG and the DC2 is pretty easy, and it's the same for both those cars, even the automatic. There is normally a bracket that hangs off the frame rail right here. A little bit different between manual and automatic, doesn't matter, but you're going to have to remove that. Once that's done, you're going to be installing the Hasport bracket. And basically, the procedure is fairly simple. You're going to slide it on the frame rail. Then there's a couple of bolt holes underneath here that the torque mount would normally mount to. You're going to go ahead and use bolts in those holes to get this thing situated. Once you get that, you're going to go in here and mark on the frame rail where you're going to drill a couple holes. And you're going to drill a couple of 1/2 inch holes right up there. Once you do that, you're going to be able to slide the bracket on. We're going to use these long, 150 millimeter long bolts. After we drill our holes, they're going to drop down there, and they're actually going to thread into the nuts that are already present in the frame rail. Now, when you tighten these down, you don't want to tighten them too tight because you'll pull those bolts right off the inside of the frame rail. So once you find the hole, you're going to thread them all the way down. You're going to tighten them down just enough to snug it up against the frame rail. Once you do that, you're going to put the nuts on underneath. Go ahead and torque those down to 33 foot-pounds. That's the proper torque spec for that. Once that bracket's in, we actually could start installing, but I'm going to go ahead and put the rear mount in. The rear mount mounts where the standard subframe goes. Now, if you've got a DC2, you're going to have to go ahead and remove this brace that usually goes right here. The brace is actually in the way of the differential on the K-Series transmission. It's quite a bit larger than the B-Series one. Go ahead and leave these bolts just a little bit loose so the bracket can slide back and forth. It's just got a little bit of play in it. That'll help you with your installation. Another thing I suggest you do is on the transmission bracket, go ahead and bolt them together. It's much easier to line up these larger bolts with the transmission rather than lining up the bracket to this. So basically we're just going to put these together, install this in there, and that way when we bring the engine in, it makes it a little bit easier to get it together. If you're coming in from the top, you might want to go ahead and bolt this whole thing onto the transmission. That way, as you come in, you can kind of guide it into the pocket here, and it makes it a little bit easier on the install. You can get that bolt through, and then that helps you align the engine over here. You would also bolt the mount on the engine side. Now that brings up an interesting point about engines. If you're using a K24 from an Accord or TSX, you're going to need to change the bracket that sits over here on the timing chain side. The bracket that comes on the Accords and TSX will not work with the Hasport mounts, so you're going to need one from a CRV or a copy of the one from the CRV. What we're going to be using is this one right here. This is Hasport's Universal K-Series block bracket. It's not strictly necessary. This engine actually came with, since it's a K20 Z3, actually came with a compatible bracket, but we're going to go ahead and use the Hasport one because at some point, long time ago, I took that bracket off and no idea where I put it. For K24s, you do need the CRV bracket or somebody's copy or the Hasport Universal K-Series block bracket.
Wait, somebody's copy of ours? Is that what you said?
Yeah. No, don't use a copy of ours.
Don't buy knockoffs.
Yeah. Then Hasport can't afford to give away mounts.
Yeah.
For installing this mount, you're going to use a stock bolt on that. That's going to thread in and just hold that bolt in place. And our engine bay is prepped, so time to put it in.
I'll go around.
Oh, we're way far away.
Oh, we're already past there. Okay.
And halt. Don't go any further.
Halt, who goes there? Oh man, look at that.
Here's a super common mistake I just made. These mounts are dual height, and that means you need to make sure you use the right side. This is set up for a K24, that's set up for a K20. We're using a K20. So what I should have done was put the mounts in like this.
I could see basically center from the backside.
Yeah, you could.
Nice. Tragedy averted.
Tragedy averted. Exactly. All right, rear mount goes in now. If you are running the high position on the side mounts, you're trying to set the engine, bring the engine up as much as you can, so you're going to use the lower bolt hole. Alrighty. Now what we're going to do is we're going to lift the motor up. Oh, I'm sorry, we're going to lift the car up so we can rock the motor to get the bottom bolts in.
Maybe so.
One more bolt. It's in. One of the tips for having a vibration-free installation is to tighten everything up in sequence. So basically what you want to do is you want to support the engine from underneath. Once you're able to do that, and usually you can just take a piece of wood, put it across the bottom of the engine, put a jack on it just to kind of lift the weight generally up. There is a little bit of slotted in these holes on this bracket, as well as slotting on this particular hole also. So you want to try and get the car as centered as possible. So look at your rear bracket, make sure it's pointing straight. It's not, twisting to the side or anything like that. But once everything looks good, you're going to tighten up the rear first. You're going to torque down all those bolts to the proper torque spec. Once you get that done, you can then come over here to your transmission side, tighten it up, and that may pull this side or not, but you're going to tighten these bolts up. Check your rear bracket again to make sure everything's straight, and if it is, go ahead and tighten down the last bolt, which is this one right here. By the way, you can also leave these bolts on this bracket a little bit loose. Not every car is perfectly straight. These holes are slotted, so there's a little bit of movement on the bracket as well. You might need that if your car has been, crashed and bent slightly, or just really old, like a lot of these are. So anyway, sequence again. Torque the rear, torque the transmission side, and last, torque the engine side. And that should help keep everything so that it's not under pressure being twisted and stuff, and should help reduce vibration. And again, just make sure it's all square. Well, that is our K20 Z3. Also works K20 A2, K20 A3. It will work for all of those. If you're doing a K24, you're going to want to drop it down. So you can use the CRV motor, but you're going to have to change the intake manifold. What winds up happening is that plastic manifold is really tall in the front. It's going to interfere with your hood. So if you wind up using just a CRV motor, 160 horsepower CRV motor, you might want to switch to a different intake manifold. All right, so that's that for this one. Let's go ahead and go to the next engine. Okay, we got our next engine. Next engine is actually a K24. It's an A1. It's a CRV motor, although it's a bit of a Frankenstein. It has a TSX head on it. We actually built this for the Budget EG, but it's now going in something else. But we also have on that the Accord transmission that the Budget EG had. So that requires different mounts. So for the transmission side, the mount looks like this. There's only basically 2 bolt holes up on top of the transmission and then a small bolt that's down on the side, but this bracket bolts on top of the transmission. It goes ahead and uses the same mount though, so it's going to look like that. And we are dropping this down to the lower position, so it's going to be flanged low. Rear mount's the same. The side mount, the time chain side mount is the same, but the rear bracket changes. This is what the rear bracket looks like. It's significantly different. It uses a bolt that runs through the both the transmission and into the block. This other bolt that runs into the block up top, and then one more hole down here that actually runs into the back of the transmission. So this rear bracket is different as well, but otherwise a very similar mount kit. So let's go ahead and put it in.
There it is.
So chassis prep is virtually identical to what we did before. We have to install this frame rail bracket, same technique for doing it on EGK2. We went ahead and put in the rear mount, easier to work with, left the bolts loose, and now we're going to put in this mount right here using the stock bolt, if we can find where we set it. Right here. Cool. And we're going to go ahead and load that in.
Oh,
Low.
Yes, because
Low.
we're going in
Low
the low
position.
position.
We're going low.
And you just flip that up.
Yeah, flip it up out of the way. Once you get these 2 bolts in, you're going to need to leave them a little bit loose, but you're going to need to get the other bolt in from the back side.
Yeah. It's perfectly lined up on this
Perfect.
moment.
On most of our rear mounts, we suggest you put the 2 top bolts in and swing everything else into position. On this one, we do not. We actually suggest that you put the bolts in for the all the bolts on the transmission first, and then lift the back one into position. You need to have all the bolts set in, then you tighten them up. Once all of the bolts are in place, you can then kind of move the back of the engine in order to get the through bolt in. All right, yeah. So let's take a quick look at this. This is set up on the lower setting. You can see we have the empty bolt holes up top, and so the engine's sitting a little bit lower. That, by the way, puts the head in the same place as it does if we'd had a K20 on the high position. All right, over on here, we have our flange flipped low on this side. And then since we have the low right and left, we use the high bolt in the rear. So that is how that's done. Here is the mount kit we are going to be using to put our next engine in, which is a K24Z. This particular motor is out of a TSX, I believe we got it out of. And it's the same as like a 2012 Civic SI motor or the 2009 to 2014 Accord motor. They're all dimensionally the same. This transmission is out of the Accord, but again, dimensionally the same as a 2012 to 2015 Civic Si transmission, or for the second gen TSX manual transmission. So this transmission is a little bit different from the others. It's going to use the same bracket that goes on top of the 3-bolt holes that we used earlier for our EGK2 kit, but on the back side, because we lack the 2 bolt holes down the differential, we're going to wind up using the EGK4 rear bracket. Because this particular engine is a K24Z, we have to use this right here, which is the Hasport Universal K-Series block bracket. The block bracket is almost identical to the one that comes on the engine. Actually has the 2 bolt holes in an odd spot, so they don't really line up with our mount kit. So you need to switch over to this one. This one works on the K24 like this, and when you use the K24Z, it works like this with this bolt down low. So K24As, K24Zs. And this is the only one that you can use with this particular motor. Now, if we were using this transmission with a different K-series, like a K20A, K20Z, K24A, that transmission will bolt right up, use whatever clutch that you want to use, either K24Z clutch or K20A clutch, whatever, and this mount kit works, and then you don't have to use a Hasport Universal block bracket. All right, so we're going to go ahead and load this on and get this motor in the car. The chassis prep is the same. Once again, we've mounted our rear mount, we installed our bracket. We're going to go ahead and put in our mount. Scott has actually bolted on the motor mount to the transmission bracket in the low position, because remember, oh yeah, low position, because we are using a K24, so we're going to use the lower position so that the head doesn't interfere with the hood. So once we get all that in there, let's lift it up and put the motor in. Alrighty, rear mount, or bracket, or whatever.
The thing with the thing.
The thing with the thing. For those of you thinking you might want to use a K20Z, because they are actually a lot more available right now, if you want to leave it drive-by-wire, you're going to want to use like an AM Infinity or possibly the ECU from Haltech. That will give you the ability to run drive-by-wire. If you want to do drive-by throttle cable, then you can actually put the 06SI manifold on these. And one of the things you can do on that is there's a timing chain cover that is built by K-Power that allows you to use the old style crank angle sensor, so you can run it with a K-probe. So that's another option as well. You would change both the crank, or add that crank angle sensor. You'd also change the cam gears, but that can be done. Okay, in. Now, I have nothing to say about that. This again is a 2012 Civic Si style transmission that comes with an LSD. Oh, by the way, something to mention, over on this side right here, if you're going to run power steering, the power steering pump is closer, and what will wind up happening is it'll actually interfere with this mount. If you want to run power steering with this engine, you're going to need to change a few things in order to get power steering up there, because it is going to want to interfere with that. We actually made this idler pulley that's a little bit farther away from the mount. We should probably put it in production, but that allows us to run this particular engine in this car. On Carter's car, what do we do for about that? I think we're using a TSX power steering pump,
yeah,
which is going to be a little bit farther away in order to get it to work. More on that when you look at our budget EK. Our what do we call that series?
Boy,
It's been different things.
It's different things. Okay,
Project.
we have this Red EK that we put one of these motors in, And we're working now on the solution for the power steering. So I would encourage you to check that video out and see what's up. All right, so this one's in, and it is time to try the last engine. We are on the 4th version of the mounts.
Cool.
All right, this is for all-wheel drive. This rear bracket looks kind of similar to our EGK4 rear bracket. Difference being, it's got this big, ginormous brace that drops down. It's got this big brace that drops down and actually grabs hold of the all-wheel drive transmission. And once again, let me stress, if you're running an EGK4 bracket with your all-wheel drive car that you purchased from Hasport, please get in touch with us. We would be happy to trade this out for this particular bracket, which is going to be a lot better for all-wheel drive.
A lot more robust.
Right, a lot more robust. Now, transmission bracket is the one that's most commonly used, which is the one that bolts up on top of the thing. By the way, this bracket used to be flat right here with a bunch of lightning holes in here. We did this cutout, actually, so that it was compatible with a Quaife sequential transmission. There was a reverse cable that goes through there, and that cutout there actually allows you to run a Quaife. So this might be interesting to people who are running all-wheel drive drag cars with Quaife transmission. So just letting you know that it works with that. So we have our mount kit, and we have our engine.
Let's do it.
Let's put it in. Chassis prep is the same as it is on all the others. Put it in our bracket, put it in our rear mount, put this in. Down we go. Now for the rear mount. Want to hand me a short 30 or a short 12? So one thing that might be a little bit easier, particularly in this situation, is to put the rear bracket on the motor. If you're coming in from the top, you have no radiator or anything, you can put it on, just slide it back and put your rear bolt in. We probably should have put the rear bracket on and then just rolled the engine back on the cart onto the mount. Probably would have worked fine. We have the all-wheel drive transmission in. This is actually a K20, so we probably could have mounted it at the higher position, but I want to lift it up and take a look at the PTO clearance before we do that. So we're gonna lift it up in the air and see if we could have raised it up another 3/4 of an inch and if that would have caused a problem. So up we go. Yeah. Well, looking back here, we have actually well over 3/4 of an inch of clearance, so we could have raised it up and mounted it at the higher position. Not sure how big the U-joint is on these things, but I know most people mount it in the lower position. But yeah,
That's still
3/4 of
an
an inch
there.
Yeah,
so.
still over an inch of clearance, so we should be fine.
And if you're running a drag car, I assume you're not going to have 62, so you're not going to get flex and be
No,
hitting things.
you would run a solid mount because honestly, though, the engine flexes in this direction under acceleration. But if you were to, let's say, downshift accidentally or something like that, the engine would rock back, and that might drive it up into the subframe. So having that little bit of extra clearance is probably a good idea regardless. And if you're all-wheel drive, you should be running a K24 really, because you're looking for probably maximize your power and your traction.
For some power.
Yeah. So anyway, all right. So that's all 4 of the types of transmissions. And remember, it's the transmission that determines the mount kit, not the engine. Any of the engines can work: K24Z, K20A, K20Z, K24A. All those motors will work with the mounts and the right block bracket. It's really the transmission that determines what goes on. So these mounts are now used mounts. They're going to have bolt impressions where everything was bolted together, impressions from other things. So they're not going to be sellable as new mounts anymore. And Hasport would like to give one of these sets to a lucky viewer. So if you're interested in receiving some free mounts from Hasport, this is what you need to do. you need to go to Instagram and you need to tag @Hasport_performance. And in the text, you need to include hashtag free EGK swap mounts. As soon as this video comes out, you will have 2 weeks to do this Instagram post. And if you do, you will be entered in the contest to win these mounts from Hasport. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take everybody who does this, we're going to put them all in a spreadsheet, and then we're going to use a random number generator to choose the winner. Once we do that, we'll contact you, ask you which mount kit you want, and we will send it to you. We actually have several different mount kits we want to do that to. We're going to do that with the EGK kit this time around. Next, we're going to do it with one of the EKK kits. And then last, we're going to do it with the EGK or EKK lean kit. Anyway, guys, I want to thank you for joining us on another episode of VTEC Academy, and I hope you learned something about using these mounts. Please think about liking and subscribing, and maybe you know somebody that needs some mounts. Why don't you tag them or give them the information so they can enter the contest? Anyway, thanks a lot for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.